Oh. That'll work. Okay. So we're going to be playing Pass the Mic then.
Well, the one for the recording is the one that we'll
pass the mic. Okay. Hi.
Hi, thank you. I'm Moulton, and this is Andrew Cole. We help penetration testers use existing technology to identify vulnerabilities that would otherwise be unrecognizable. Today, we're going to show you how to use PowerShell, pre-installed software package that exists on Windows machines from this Windows 10 to maximize your freedom of movement through the network and
That seems a bit early. Thank you. Okay. So, how are we going to do these things? We're going to teach you, we're going to teach you to access code that already exists on the box, whether it's managed or native, hide pockets, hide processes, registry entries, and connections. We're going to teach you to keep it clean, persist, and profit. Before we begin, we'd like to thank you people, starting of course with Tyron. It's awesome to get paid to do this research and present it. We'd like to thank Microsoft, particularly Jeff Snover, for coming with PowerShell in the first place. The EasyHook team, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and the PowerShell community. You know who you are.
PowerShell community is awesome. I think it's the best community in the computer hacking world, and it's just exploding and getting better by the minute because there's a lot of really smart people with great ideas who are perfectly happy to share their wisdom with everybody else.
So, with that, I'd like to take just a moment to more properly introduce ourselves before we go on to the content. As I said, my name is Rich Moulton. I am, I'm recently retired from the Air Force. I was an electronics technician. I was a systems administrator, an analyst, and finally a developer before I joined Chiron as a subject matter expert, meaning basically security researcher. Cole?
Hi, I'm Andrew Cole. Everybody just calls me Cole. I got most of my computer training in the Army. I was a journeyman level CNO operator for the Army. I did that for a few years. Before that, I was pretty much a hardware guy. I was a solder jockey. I fixed the things when they broke. And since coming to Chiron, I now get to do independent research, content development, and instruction. So it's a pretty cool job.
Alright, so I promise you we're going to teach you how to maximize your freedom of movement through the network and to increase the chance of success of a successful penetration test. To begin with, we're going to teach you how to access native code on box. What is native code? Native code is basically a bunch of ones and zeros, string meaningless to you and I, instructions to the computer basically on what to do. It exists all over the box, generally in the form of EXEs or DLLs on Windows machine, traditionally known as the Win32 API. There is a lot of functionality that already exists on your box that you can normally access through writing C or C++ code, compiling it, assembling it, linking it. And it's traditionally been very difficult for non-programmers to access this. Recently, with the advent of the .NET framework, that we'll talk about momentarily, the technology known as Platform Invoke, or P-Invoke, has enabled .NET programmers to access this native code on the box to gain more full control over the box. Specifically, I would point you in the direction of the Microsoft Developers Network, just Google MSDN. And you can find examples of how to use any of the functions that appear in the Win32 API online. We've got an example here of accessing this Win32 API through PowerShell. This example comes to us from Lee Holmes. I think it was actually in his book, the PowerShell Cookbook. So Lee Holmes put together this example called Invoke Windows API. The code is a little bit complicated. I'm not actually going to walk through the entire code, but rather show you the example at the bottom. A little bit bigger.
Of course I can.
Make that a little bigger. Basically, what we're going to do here is use the Win32 API to create a hard link file. We're going to create a file on the disk called linktarget.txt or something to that effect. And then we're going to create another file that points to the contents of the first using the Win32 API. The specific function that we're going to use appears on line 126 is create hard link, and it appears in kernel32.dll. PowerShell script that Lee Holmes has put together enables us to simply specify the DLL we want to load, the Win32 API function call, and then the parameters that we want to pass to this function. And we see at the conclusion of it, what we end up with is a hard link that points to our original file. So what we've done here, again, we've taken an existing file, linktarget.txt. We've called the Win32 API through kernel32.dll to create a hard link that points to the original file. And this is a very simple example. This may not perhaps be the most perfect example for red teamers, but the idea here is what's important. The idea is you can access any Win32 API functionality on the box through a PowerShell script. I think that's pretty powerful. No pun intended.
So, I did not do that purpose.
Okay. So in addition to native code and the Win32 API, we learned that you've also got access to managed code. This should be a given, perhaps, in PowerShell, since it's built on top of the .NET framework. But we'll go over that again. Sometime a little longer than a decade ago, Microsoft came out with the idea. It would be nice if you could have an environment, perhaps a virtual machine or a common language runtime, that would go and check all the parameters that you're putting into your functions so that you could avoid things like pointers that point to nothing or perhaps the wrong place, perhaps variables that might overflow into other areas. And so they created this whole common language runtime that run what we call managed code. Basically, it's code that checks itself for validity. This common language runtime runs in or is basically a COM server, very old Microsoft technology, called the .NET framework. It exists in one single DLL, and what it does basically is it takes a high-level language, actually one of many high-level languages, either Visual Basic .NET, C#, PowerShell, C++ .NET, and it compiles it into an intermediate language, a bytecode, if you will, that is then interpreted just in time in the common language runtime. That's the .NET framework in a nutshell. And when we're running PowerShell, basically what we're doing is we're taking another, even higher level language and accessing the code from the .NET framework to take control of the box. Let's see here. I don't think I have an example of compiling code at this point, but we'll get to that later. I will show you instead a very simple example of how to call the .NET framework create a message box. What we have on the screen up above is a PowerShell script that loads a DLL. It's a .NET Framework DLL, so it's intermediate code. It's basically the Microsoft Visual Basic DLL. And double colons there on line 5 say, we're going to take Microsoft Visual Basic interaction, which is an object, and we're going to call a static message called message box. It's going to put the text in the first set of little quotes in there. The type of box that we're going to create is going to be a yes, no, or cancel box. It's a question box. And it's going to have the title Adjusted B-Sides. Unfortunately, because there's some hackers here today, we don't have internet access, but if you were to go to Google and Google MSDN and Microsoft.Visual Basic, you could actually find the definition for this static function, and you would see what all the arguments are, and the other options available to you. Right now I'm going to run it, and we see that from PowerShell we've called this managed code to create a dialog box. Again, may or may not be something that you want to do in a penetration test. Maybe it might be more advantageous to create a password box that says, please enter your password again because you authenticate, whatever the case may be. Go ahead and take a bit going. Alright. So that, in a nutshell, is how to access managed code from the box. So far, we've shown you how to access the Win32 API. We've showed you how to access managed code from PowerShell. Next, we'll begin to talk about how you can use this to hide files, processes, registry entries, and what's the other one? Oh, network connections. So let's see here. I was at a bit of a loss as to where to begin with this because this information is all kind of each module builds on the other, but they I don't know, it's kind of like more of a spiral rather than a ladder. So I'll just pick a place to start. We'll start with hooking. Let's see here. When you run a process and it calls other functions, the first thing it does is create space on the stack, and then it jumps to this other function to start doing its functionality. When the function returns, cleans up that stack space, and it's basically like you never left. When we hook a process, what we do is we overwrite the pointer for that function call, so that instead of going to the function that you intended to go to, you go somewhere else. You take a detour. And we'll use the term again a little later. Traditionally, in user mode rootkits, they would use this functionality. You would inject some code into a process so that when someone tries to do something like list processes or list files on the disk, what you get instead is filtered output. Perhaps they'll do the call for you. They'll take the results, filter out the results that they don't want to see, and then present the rest to you. This works in user mode pretty well. There are a couple of functions that or processes that you cannot inject into in modern Windows. And this basically boils down to reasons of digital rights management. Let's see here. There are certain protected processes that, for the reason of enforcement of digital rights management, they don't let you mess with from user mode. So if you try to inject into these processes, you'll be blocked. There are also system processes and system threads created by the kernel that will not allow you to mess with them. Basically, they'll sooner crash than allow you to run them. So, failing user mode hooking, you can go to kernel mode hooking. You can use similar techniques to user mode hooking to trick the kernel, the core of the operating system, if you will, to filter out results that we don't want the user to see. This has become more difficult recently because in 64-bit Windows, they have some technology that ensures that anything you try to inject into the kernel has been signed by a proper authority. The technology that we're going to introduce in another slide or so, EasyHook, basically gets around this, and talk about that momentarily. So in the 90s, people were doing this user mode hooking, kernel mode hooking. It was all the rage, all the cool kids were doing it. And somebody figured out what was going on, and they wrote a paper on it, dynamic binary modification. Basically, you take a program that's operating, it's running, you change it while it's running, and then you get to do other things. And then, of course, you can clean up and just back before anybody realizes what's going on. Microsoft at some point must have read this paper, because they came out with a tool called Microsoft Detours that actually uses this technique for legitimate purposes. Code patching, basically. If you find a function is dangerous, is doing something that you didn't intend to do, you can then go in and hook it and change it while it's running. The great thing about detours is it allows you from C or C++ to go in, as I said, to any running process, change the code while it's running. Unfortunately, you can't do that for managed code, say from Visual Basic.net, C#, C++.net, or PowerShell, until recently. In 2008, Christopher Lucet, I think I pronounced his right, and Jason Stenning, they came up with a tool called EasyHook. And it's kind of like Microsoft Detours, but for managed code. It allows you to hook native or managed code from managed code. So again, using Visual Basic.net, C#, C++, or PowerShell, you can create hooks into native or managed code. It works something like this. There's an assembly language function that you inject that rewrites function pointers. You specify exactly which function it is you want to overwrite, where you want it to point instead, and then the functionality that you want to happen. And versus magic. Let's see here. So we're going to show you momentarily how to do this from PowerShell. In the interest of simplicity, we have simply written a couple of files to disk, and then we execute the files on disk. Though, as probably most of you are aware, it's just another step or two to be able to do this strictly from memory. So with that, let's take a look at the example program that comes with EasyHook, filemon.exe and filemon.inject.dll. What you see before you is a little bit of C# code, and I'll show you momentarily when we get down to our modifications how we use this in PowerShell. But basically at the front, at the top end, we've got a couple of using statements that says we're going to use this functionality, and the system is supposed to go out and find the DLLs that provide that functionality. We're creating a class called the filemon interface, which is the actual DLL that we're going to inject into either native or managed code. And we're going to define a couple of functions. These functions are really kind of irrelevant. We didn't use them for our specific modifications. But first, it makes sure that the DLL injection took place all right. That is installed. On create file is going to watch for a process to use the create file function. And when it does, it goes out and writes the name of the file that was created. Report exception will let us know if there were any problems in the injection. And ping, I guess, was supposed to provide some functionality they never got around to putting in there. So the meat of the program here is the main function on line 43. Basically, let's see here, you're going to call this program on the command line and pass it a process ID number. It's going to check to make sure that it exists, and when it injects, it will let you know that it's successfully injected. Scroll down to the result. Otherwise, it will break and give you an exception. Go down a little bit further. Okay, it's going to create a server that the DLL will talk back to. Let's see here. The See line 91, it's actually trying to do the injection. And if we press return, for example, we can exit, at which point this EXE will unload the DLL from the target process. So we'll see that in action in just a moment. Go on to file line inject. This is the actual DLL that we're going to inject. We're calling the same system functionality. Let's see here. We've got a class, in this case it's just called main. The important parts are line 16. We create what they call a local hook, which is basically a user land hook called create file hook. Hold on there. Lines 37 to 42, basically we're specifying that the function we want to hook is create file W, and it appears in kernel32.dll. Let me ask at this point, how many of you in the room are currently consider yourself developers? Not a whole bunch. So I'm going to briefly say that this function, create file W, refers to the Unicode version of this function. When you see functions with this W at the end, usually that infers that there's an A version for people who use ASCII. Basically, if the program was written 10 or more years ago, it's probably using ASCII. If it was written in the last 10 years, it's probably using the W version of the function, Unicode. So, you're specifying the function we want to hook. Let's create file W, Unicode version. We're going to create a delegate on line 39 called dCreateFile. And the delegate basically says, when create file W is called, instead of directing that function, direct to this function. The function we're specifying is createFile_hooked. So now, we injected our hook. We said when someone calls createFile W, we'll set createFile W hooked. And the specific functionality is a little bit lower. On line 86, basically what they did was they went to a site called cvote.net, which tells you how to call native code from managed code. And they copied and pasted the signature of that function in there. The next section, from 98 to 110, is almost identical. What's the important change? The important change is on line 103. They use the extern keyword to say that this function is defined outside of my program. It's defined somewhere in DLL. And then in the final section, this is 112 through about 120, they actually copied and pasted the signature again, this time leaving out the extern keyword because we're going to put new functionality in there. And the new functionality we want is this. We're going to call back to the EXE, and we are going to provide some information to it every time our function is called. So every time the injected function, the injected process calls the create file function, we're going to provide the file name and print it out. Do we have a video of this, or did we just do the video of our modifier? Or just the modifier? Okay, so we'll show you the modifications of this. Okay, so let's talk about this before we get to the demo. For the purposes of this demonstration, we took the example that exists in EasyBook and we modified it to hide a file. In order to hide a file, process, connection, and registry key, basically what you're going to do is the same thing that the EasyBook people have already done, except that you'll need to specify a different function, whatever function it is that you want to hijack. I think for the purposes of our demonstration, we chose to hide a file using the find next file W function, which of course is the Unicode version. To hide a process, connection, and registry key would be similar. You just have to hijack the specific function that's being used by your target process. Let's see here. To be sure that you're hiding or hijacking the appropriate function, what you can do is open up a debugger like WinDebug, turn on logging. As you're going through the execution of the program, it will show you a list of all the functions that are being called. This is the easiest way to do it. In the course of putting together this demonstration, I picked a couple of that function names. So be sure you know which function you're hijacking before you get into it. Let's go into the demo. Actually, let's open up the code real quick, and we'll go to the demo. Okay. So these are our modifications to the DLL. And let's see, basically the DLL at this point is unchanged. I want to say at line 16, I basically copied and pasted a structure that was defined at pinvoke.net, Win32 find data. And the reason I did this is because the function that I wanted to put, find next file W, actually used an argument with this data type, Win32 find data. So I just had to go out to pinvoke.net, copy and paste, and then on line 36 and 37, I define some local hooks. I'm going to hook string compare, just to check to see if the file name that I was interested in was part of the list. I hooked find next file hook, because that's the function I intended to so again, scroll down here. Let's see here, on line 67, 66 maybe, through 71. I basically copied the sections from create file hook down below and repeated them for string compare. And then I did it again for find next file hook. My string compare I knew was in kernel32.dll because of the SDN. Find next file W was also in kernel32.dll. On line 68, 76 respectively, I created delegates for these functions, and I called them just plain vanilla names, string compare hooks, find next file hooks, and then I defined the functionality that I wanted below. I should point out line 79 and the other two lines that are similar to that are basically just setting an access control list that says any threads within this process may call this function. So it doesn't change much. Go ahead and scroll down a bit. I left the create file information in there, basically copied and pasted information from pinvoke.net a little lower to create definitions of functionality for the function that I was interested in. Okay, it's a little bit lower. Okay, there's so this function I want to call find next file used a pointer to find file and Win32 find data, find file data. See on line 190 asset basically just uses the pinvoke implementation. I copied and pasted from pinvoke.net, and my functionality is a little bit lower. Stop right there. I think this is the important information here. Line 225. Basically what I'm doing, 224 actually, I call find next file myself. I take the results, and I say if the results include a file name called secret.txt, act like nothing happened. What I did in line 228 is, instead of returning the file secret.txt to the original caller, I just called find next file once more, and then passed those results to them so that they never see secret.txt. String compare stuff is similar. I'm not bothered with that. Basically, just copy and paste it. So let's see it in action. Well, I think we didn't want to tempt the demo dots, so we recorded a video of this.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, please.
So from the get-go here, we've got our script in the ISE. We started, it's running, you can see it's now hooked to the PowerShell process. So we're creating two files, one named public.txt, one named secret.txt. The secret.txt matches our string, so it's hidden from PowerShell because PowerShell can't see it because it uses find next file W. CMD.exe still uses find next file A. So it's able to find both of the files. They're still there. But it is right there. Once PowerShell gets back though, it still can't see it because it's hooked. Now if I come over here and remove our hook, it should be able to now see the files. And I think the video actually jumped in a second late. Was there a big PSP box up there when it first came on? Yeah, so that's a fun, interesting point. This is a fully protected box. It's running Avast antivirus free. The latest edition. Signature is 100% up to date, and I just did this video in the last 24 hours. So it's scanning the DLLs getting loaded, it's scanning them on disk, and doesn't seem to be noticing or caring that we're hooking the file. The only reason I picked on Avast is global market share. They have the largest market share of any antivirus product. So then, this is fine and dandy, but how do we survive a reboot? You've got the traditional persistence methods that everybody's been using since the dawn of time, right? You're either going to hide in a registry entry, right? Find something like a run key or a load key and put your code there. A lot of red teams like to use services, right? Register a custom service, but you still leave some evidence there. You can schedule a job. You know, there's a number of avenues, but they've all been used and abused by various types of malware and hackers forever, and are pretty much burned. So with PowerShell, they brought in some new, fun, and more exciting ways to do it. Who here has actually played around with like PowerSploit? No? One or two? So PowerSploit, Natal's Nishang. All these have some form of a WMI persistence module, which registers a WMI event for persistence, and that's better than the traditional methods, but it still leaves something on disk. So the thought is, why don't we just use a more creative implementation to turn an old school method to be a little more new school? There's nothing wrong with using the reg key for persistence. It's not going to get caught, but it's still going to run. You just need to keep people from being able to see what you have in there. So if you were to, which one is it that hooks the registry? If you were to hook reginum key XA and reginum key XW, your program would still run. But if someone opened up a command line and did a reg query, your payload won't show up. If they pop open regedit, it shouldn't show up there either. So you can still use these old methods and just hide the fact that you're using them for your persistence. Same thing in theory would work with scheduling a job and hiding the job, and pretty much any other method. You're only limited by your imagination. So what can somebody do with this? There's, again, a number of already amazing scripts that are out there that we can combine and leverage to our advantage. A couple of them. Invoke reflective PE injection. What this will let us do is take these same DLLs, and rather than having to put them on disk like we have, we can store them in a byte array in the script and reflectively load them into the process of our choosing. By reflectively loading them, we get the added advantage that they don't register as a loaded module. Another great script from the Veil Power Tools team, I guess now it's the Veil Empire team, is invoke mass template. So what this will do is it'll hack up a quick temporary web server and then use WMI to tell a remote box or boxes to call back and grab the script that's being run on the web server and run it. Anyone who has had Thunderstruck turn on at max volume on their computer in the last month since Empire came out knows exactly how powerful this can be. And the last one's a little less known, but it's still a goodie. Who here loved Netcat when it was still young? Yeah, well, somebody else did too, and they completely rewrote the whole thing from top to bottom in PowerShell and called it PowerCat. So why does nobody use Netcat anymore? It's signature. Everything sees it as malware. Do you know how hard it is to signature a PowerShell script as malware? The invoke mass minicat script which does what it sounds like. It pulls a domain's worth of plain text spreads at once from one box. It got signatured by Windows Defender, but it turns out if you just delete the comments out and rename the function, it still works perfectly well. So now, combining those scripts and some easy hook methods, you could theoretically create a remotely deployable, PowerShell-based, user mode rootkit that doesn't require anything to be written to the file system. I'm going to do a fair bit of coding, but you can do it. Theoretically, you would use invoke mass template as your delivery method. You are going to have some domain credentials in order to make this deliver. Otherwise, you're not going to have the ability to force the remote box to call back and grab your script. But if you load a script that would first write the byte arrays that contain your EasyHook DLLs, and write them as well as PowerCat and a startup script to some random registry keys. The Powlix virus that came out in the last year or two, that was a PowerShell virus that was residing solely in the memory, solely in the registry and not at all in the file system. We're going to use a similar technique. You just write it to the registry, and you then would write a value to the run key to start up your startup script on boot. You would then have to manually start the script for the first time or bounce the box. I would not recommend the latter. Go with starting the script manually. But when the script loaded up, it would use an invoke reflective PE injection to load the EasyHook byte arrays into the memory of the process that you wanted, and then use those DLLs to hide the registry keys containing your rootkit components. You could then start PowerCat via PowerShell to bind a port on the system, and then hook what you needed to hide the listening port from network connections. It's all theoretically possible. We haven't taken it quite that far yet. But quite frankly, the fact that it can be theoretically possible is slightly scary. And again, this shouldn't get flagged by an AV product. We just did the demo with Avast. I did test it against Avira and AVG as well. Neither of them are flagging the EasyHook DLLs. Even written to disk and run a manual scan on them, they don't flag them as being malicious, even though they came out in 2008. So, yay, antivirus signatures. Okay, so theoretically, how can you protect your network? Well, you do some network traffic monitoring. It never hurts to do that. PowerShell logging. If you're doing defense and you're not logging PowerShell on your network, you probably should start. It's built into Microsoft. You just have to turn it on and define some objects, and your logging will be turned on. Suspect you might have something bad, you can monitor the registered modules in your processes. The EasyHook DLLs could be there, but mostly you're pretty much stuck with memory dumps, which, let's be honest, whoever does memory dump, unless you've already gotten caught. Okay, so all the code that we've used today is up on GitHub. That has the file hide code that you can run to hide particular files from a process.
On that note, I kind of glossed over this, but the examples that I showed you were in C#, and the code that you can get from our Git repo is actually a PowerShell script. It's got C# in there, and it dynamically compiles the C# on the fly with the compiler built into the .NET framework.
If you haven't checked out the other PowerShell toolkits and frameworks that are out there, I would strongly suggest you do. There's a lot of great stuff out there. It's also not up here, but PowerSploit is another one that I would definitely get into. And if you are looking to defend your network, if you are a blue teamer who's just sitting in here who thought it might be interesting, there is a PowerShell Arsenal by Matt Graver. It's a completely PowerShell-based reverse engineering set. That's just our general contact information. And does anyone have
Questions about how to increase your ability to maneuver the network and increase the chances of success of a penetration test using the techniques that we demonstrated today?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question from a blue team perspective. Do you think that can it catch the execution of these on a machine? Or is it using memory votes, memory calls, and kernel processes?
The short answer is no. Because it's all supposedly legitimate code that already exists. It's been bringing to API. It all looks completely legitimate. It looks like an administrator doing his thing. And I should mention that the reason that Microsoft put together their Microsoft eTours project in the beginning is because they had legitimate reasons for wanting to divert the functionality of certain processes.
Anybody else?
If there's no other questions, you guys don't run off. If you could think of a trivia question or two for, we've got two speakers, so we've got a lot of giveaways here. So if you don't have, you guys think of a trivia question, I got one or two. So what was the name of the Microsoft set of APIs or coding standard that was developed to legitimize API cookie? Okay, right here, Chris. Microsoft eTours, right? And we'll give you a rubber ducky for Alright, next question. Next question I got for a copy of Metasploit Unleashed. What local Augusta GRU student wrote the majority of Power Cats? There. That would be my son, Luke Baggett, who was the majority of the Power Cat. That's correct. That's correct. Very good. Sorry. Alright, you guys come up with some questions here?
Sure, this one's a little more of like a history question. What famous event in malware had its anniversary? I believe it was 3 days ago. First instance of something that occurred.
Is that the board for it?
No? Even older.
Oh.
Literally the first, early malware. Yes.
Like from actual malware or like with the name is based on?
The name's based off of it.
Well, I get the, it's actual like little
A moth in Relay 70. Yeah, that just had its anniversary a couple days ago.
Wait. Number 2 or a rubber ducky or a team?
That's not malware, that's a moth.
It's a bug.
It's a bug, but it's not malware.
Alright, we'll do an Uber 2.
That'll do.
An awesome Bluetooth sniffer. With that. What else, guy? You got another trivia question?
I've got one.
Alright, go ahead.
Can anyone tell me, we didn't mention it in this briefing, but I wonder, since we're all here in PowerShell talk, can anyone tell me what was the original name of PowerShell? Sir?
Monad?
It was Monad.
Very good. Yeah. Got a rubber ducky for you here. For a red team man, you got another one?
Who was the original writer of PowerShell? Who wrote Monad? And what position did he just receive at Microsoft? Give you a hint. It's the highest position you can get at Microsoft.
CEO?
No, not that kind of position. It's the highest technical position you can get at Microsoft. Okay, in that case, I'll settle for just the name of the person who invented PowerShell.
Two hands.
Sure.
There you go.
That's close enough to Snowbird. We'll take it over.
Jay Snover.
Yes, and he just made technical fellow, so.
Alright. Congratulations, everyone. Alright, and I got one more thing we had. Some of the vendor drawings. So the network licenses of the Sans booth. Sandra Simpson, U.S. Army, and Renew Maury of Macy's. You won Sans licenses to networks. You have to pick those up before 3 o'clock. Pick those up before 3 o'clock. So if you're in here, go pick up those licenses. You got 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Everybody else? Thank you, DRU. Thank you to all of you. You've been a wonderful audience. If you have any other questions, our email is somewhere on these slides. Cole, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us and check out the Git.repo. We'll continue to update it with more examples for you. Thank you very much.